instead, Congress is focused on lowering the FDA's standards for approval so that companies can get their products on the market faster. The industry argues that patients just aren't getting new drugs fast enough and it's too hard for them to get drugs approved. I think this is a very dangerous game. So I just want to ask a question about this. Dr. Kesselheim, can you tell us about the authority the FDA already has to speed innovative new drugs to market, and if the FDA is using that authority?
Sure. There are a number of pathways that the FDA has to provide patients with access to important new drugs treating serious or life-threatening conditions or meeting unmet medical need. There are at least 5 different pathways that have the effect of or the intent of trying to speed new cures to market. And last year, approximately 2/3 of all the drugs approved by the FDA were approved via one of these accelerated development or review pathways. So not only does the FDA have these pathways already in place, but it is using them quite liberally. And actually, if you look at the statistics, a lot of new drugs are being approved on the basis of studies in treating biomarkers or other surrogate endpoints. About half of new drugs are being approved on the basis of surrogate endpoints now. Most new drugs are approved on the basis of studies in 6 months or less, despite the fact that they're intended to be for chronic diseases and used for a lifetime. So I think that the actual statistics and data don't support the industry's assertion that there is a very long and arduous process for testing, approving new drugs once it's known that those drugs work. In fact, it's quite the opposite.
Well, that's very helpful. Lowering FDA standards may make drug companies even more profitable, but it is not going to make them more innovative. So let me ask you another question about this. Some of the proposals put forward in Congress would allow drug makers to advertise and promote uses for their drugs that aren't approved by the FDA, these so-called off-label uses, that have only initial clinical evidence that they might work, like maybe a case study or a retrospective analysis or very small trial. Dr. Kesselheim, as an expert, can you explain how innovation and safety would be affected if these proposals were passed into law?
Yeah, these proposals are very dangerous for patients and for public health. What they do is they would allow companies to get drugs approved on the basis of an extremely narrow, limited indication, and then promote them widely for conditions where they might not be effective and they may be unsafe because there hasn't been any testing done in them. Patients want transformative innovations. They want treatments for their conditions, but they want treatments that work. And they want treatments that are safe. They don't just want innovation for the sake of innovation. And if you don't provide companies with a requirement to do those kinds of tests by virtue of having the FDA approve those conditions, then companies historically, as we've seen throughout U.S. history, companies won't do them. So you're not going to get that kind of testing that we need in order to guide physicians trying to prescribe these drugs, to guide patients who are looking for these drugs. We don't know how we wouldn't know how to use them or in whether they'd be working. And meanwhile, because all these drugs are invariably expensive, we'd be dumping tons and tons of resources into these treatments that aren't well known. When what we could be doing is testing them first to make sure that they work, and then using them appropriately.
Yeah, that's a very powerful point. The FDA is the gold standard around the world because it has protected the safety of Americans and it has ensured that the drugs that are approved are in fact effective. We could dismantle the FDA, but lower standards wouldn't produce any new cures, and it certainly wouldn't keep us any safer. If we're serious about finding new cures, then Congress should better fund the FDA so that the FDA can do its work. We need to make a real commitment of real dollars here. So thank you very much. Congress.